Hello and welcome everyone. I am Chelsea Macias, a museum educator for the Whatcom Museum. We're just getting started here, so as we wait for everyone to come in, I'm going to do a few announcements. Um, First, I'd like to say I will be today's moderator, and this is for the Humanities Washington Speaker Bureau's program, Civil Conversations in an Angry Age with David Smith. I will share my screen and to run over a few announcements for the museum. Let me get that up real quick. So first, I would like to say that the Whatcom Museum acknowledges that we gather on traditional territory of the Lummi people, the Nooksack and the Nooksack people who have lived in the Coast Salish region from time immemorial. The museum honors our relationship with all of our Coast Salish neighbors and our shared responsibilities to their homeland where we all reside today. Alrighty. Thank you all for being here. Like I said, I'll be the moderator. So as we go through today's program, I will be moderating the chat function, which will be the main function that you all can participate and engage with our speaker. Throughout our speaker's presentation, he will take pauses to go through the chat and respond to any comments or questions. So as of right now, the museum is still closed and we will remain closed to the public until phase 2. But our museum store is open Wednesday through Sunday from 12 to 5 p.m. And all of our programs are virtual as of right now. So of course we have today's program and upcoming, we have a few programs here that are upcoming. We have the North Cascades Audubon Society, A Tale of Two Puffins, on the 26th. And in February, we have a collector show and tell. And on the 11th, we have the Washington State Northwest Regional Archives with Jeanette Gomez. So please go to our website, whatcommuseum.org, for more information. Let's see. The other thing about today's presentation is that we will be sending out evaluations to everyone at the end of the program. So please look out for those in your emails that you registered with. And please take the time to respond to that. Humanities Washington really appreciates that and uses all your feedback for these programs. Alrighty, so we're all here to see our presenter. I'll stop sharing here. David Smith holds a PhD in religious studies from Temple University. For the past decade, he has held roles as a lecturer, assistant professor, and associate professor of philosophy and religious studies. He currently teaches at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of Washington and frequently gives lectures in libraries, community centers, and retirement centers. Now, without further ado, I'll pass this over to David.
All right. Thank you, Chelsea. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Civil Conversation in an Angry Age. This presentation will probably last about an hour and 15 minutes, and you are cordially invited to share your questions and your comments, your perspectives in the chat box. So if you can find that chat option in your control panel, you are welcome to put a question or comment in there at any time. What I will do is pause after each major section of the presentation. I'm not going to wait till the very end for Q&A. I like to do a little bit all along the way. So I'll pause periodically, see if anybody has put a question or a comment in the chat box, and I'll interact with as much of that material as I can. I can't promise I'll get to everything. Depends on how much material is in there. And I have to keep an eye on the clock tonight and keep us moving. But I would love to hear from you. Okay. So Civil Conversation in an Angry Age. This presentation really comes from several sources, 3 sources. It comes from like 20 years of teaching controversial topics to college students for a long time, and most recently to adult audiences. I've been teaching controversial topics in religion, ethics, and politics, what I call the big three. Yeah, religion, ethics, and politics. That's what I do. And I try to be as fair and balanced as I possibly can. I try to empower people to think for themselves. It's not my job to tell my audiences, including you, what to believe. I'm not here to do that. When I lecture on controversial topics, I try to give both sides of everything, or all sides, if there are more than two. My mission is to empower people to think. So I have to handle controversial topics all the time, and I try to make everyone feel welcome. So that 2-decade period of teaching this material in the humanities to college students and adults has certainly informed my presentation tonight. I'll also be presenting the work and modifying it a little bit of a philosopher named Edward Langerak, who's written about civility. I'll share some of his insights. Finally, this comes from my own personal experiences talking to people in my life with whom I disagree. And I'll be honest with you, I've had both successes and failures at civil conversation in an angry age. All right. Now, Humanities Washington, who sponsors this lecture along with the museum, they like to frame all of the content of these presentations in story. So very briefly, I'm going to tell you a story about my life, a significant change of mind that I had on one of the big three, and share a little bit about the challenges having conversations with people in my life. Before I do, let's define tonight's topic. What do you say? That's a philosopher's first task. Always define your terms. So, what is civility anyway? Oxford Dictionary tells us it's formal politeness and courtesy in behavior or speech. The philosopher Edward Langerak defines it as treating others with appropriate courtesy and respect. Now, I'll be honest with you, I like Langerak's dictionary definition rather a little bit better than the dictionary definition, because I like the two words appropriate and respect. Appropriate tells me there's a little flexibility depending on the people involved, their personalities, maybe their family dynamics, or even their culture. What is uncivil to one may not be to another. People have different degrees of sensitivity in terms of how we discuss things. So appropriate tells me that I can try to use good judgment depending on the people and the context. I also like the word respect in Langerak's definition, and I think civility is essentially that. It's respect. If you and I disagree about things that are important, if we treat each other with respect, we are recognizing the full humanity of the other person, regardless of their identity or their belief system. Recognizing the full humanity of the other person, regardless of identity, their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their age, or their belief system. What do they believe about religion? Which political party do they pledge allegiance to, if any? And so on. Those things don't matter. If I treat you with respect, I treat you as fully human, regardless of your identity or beliefs. So I'll use the word civility tonight essentially as a synonym for respect, okay? So when you look at these definitions, they're not very complicated, are they? They're pretty simple, but they're not always easy to put into practice. Simple and easy are two different things. Simple just means we understand, right? Easy means we do it all the time, but we don't. How many of you could say you've always been civil toward other people? I can't. I do my best, and there's always room for improvement. So that's the challenge. Now, very briefly, I want to tell you my story. I grew up in the world of fundamentalist Christianity, extremely conservative Protestant Christianity. As a teenager and 20-something, I bought into it completely. I pledged allegiance. I was very sincere and believed very deeply. Over about a 15-year period, however, as a younger adult, younger, because I'm still really young, but younger. Took me about 15 years, and I changed my mind, and I became a very progressive thinker in religion, very liberal slash skeptical. I didn't become liberal on everything, in the world, but I became very liberal in religion. And then that opened up the possibility for me to consider changing my mind about other things related to politics and ethics. When I say ethics, I mean the really controversial stuff like abortion and the death penalty and gun control and all of that. I teach courses on that stuff. Social justice, criminal justice. I handle all those topics in my lectures. So becoming very progressive in my view of religion really opened things up for me to reconsider. And it was a very slow, for me, a very rational journey, and at times a very painful one in a variety of ways, emotionally, socially, even financially. So the point tonight of my telling you this story is that not to debate religion or anything else. We are not here tonight to debate controversial topics. We are here to talk about how to talk about controversial topics. So I had to decide how to talk to people in my life, what to say to whom. I wasn't sure what I could say to family members and friends. Would they judge me? Would they still want to be friends? How would it change the relationship if they knew I had changed my mind about things that they held deeply? So family and friends, I had successes and failures, and I wasn't always sure what to say. Now, tonight we're focusing on civility, how to have respectful conversations with people who disagree with us about things that matter. But I do want us to keep in mind that a conversation can be civil, but not very meaningful. Just because you and I have a respectful disagreement doesn't mean we're accomplishing anything. So we also have to be thinking about that, how to have meaningful and productive conversations about religion, ethics, politics, I say the big three, or anything else that you need to have a conversation about with someone in your life. Now, to converse or not to converse, that is the question. We're here tonight to figure out, number one, why we humans disagree so much about important things, why it's so easy to be uncivil, and then thirdly, what we can do about it. We're going to focus on that. But let's keep a parallel question in mind. Who in your life, who in my life is a candidate for civil conversation? Not everybody is. Not everybody is a candidate for civil disagreement on every topic. And it depends on the person and the topic, right? I may be able to talk to a family member about politics, but not religion, or vice versa. Not everyone's a candidate for civil conversation on every topic. And guess what? That might include you and me. Maybe I'm the one, rather, who isn't ready to have a conversation about something important. Maybe I'm the one who needs to do some inner work before I can talk to the people in my life about it, you see. All right. So there you go. I'll come back to this story periodically throughout the presentation tonight. Okay. Now, why do you and I disagree about stuff? I mean, after all, if we all agreed on everything, civility would be easy. Right? If you would just agree with me, we could get along great, right? Why do we disagree? So we're going to do a little bit of fun philosophy for the first few minutes here tonight, then a little psychology, and then hopefully by the time we're done, we'll have some practical insights as to how we can have better conversations with each person in our life who disagrees. All right, so we're going to have to define some terms here again. We live in a world where people are confused about truth as a concept, as well as what the truth is about all sorts of things. We've been living through all this political turmoil and all this controversy about truth and fake news and whether the election was legit or whether there's widespread fraud, and people were confused about some things, weren't they? So we're going to have to get clear on what this concept of truth is. Even when you and I disagree about what it is in any given area of life, if we don't agree on the concept, how are we going to have a conversation? I define, and this is a standard and traditional definition of truth in philosophy. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. Now, what's reality? I just define reality essentially as that which existed or happened in the past, or that which exists or is happening in the present. It either existed or happened in the past, or it exists or is happening right now. I think that's reality. And so if I speak truth, what I say corresponds to what existed or happened, or what currently exists or is happening. Okay? Anybody want to respond to these very, very basic concepts? How we've defined civility, truth, and reality before I go on. Anybody want to throw something in chat? Don't be bashful. A question, a comment, a perspective on these basic ideas. All right, one of you shared a comment in chat. It depends on personal opinion and experience. Personal opinion and experience are completely relevant for sure, but I can have a personal opinion, and we're all entitled. Remember what the old Senator Patrick Moynihan once said, and the people in the press have been quoting him over the past few years. We're all entitled to what? We're all entitled to our own opinions, but not our own facts, right? So we have the right to opinions, but sometimes our opinions turn out to be wrong. And so I can't equate my opinion with truth. Difference between truth and belief, someone says in chat. Absolutely. And in fact, I'm going to ask you a question related to truth and belief before we're done tonight. It's one of my favorite fun philosophical questions about truth and belief, but they're not identical, are they? That's right. Someone, a denier like the Holocaust denier. I mean, I look at disagreements that we have in society as being one of two things, either a reasonable mainstream disagreement or an unreasonable marginalized disagreement. The evidence, so for example, I think people can legitimately debate things like abortion, the existence of God, the death penalty. I mean, these are mainstream debates, and you can make good arguments on both sides. But then there are people who deny things like the Holocaust that are just completely outside the boundaries of rationality because the evidence for the Holocaust is overwhelming. And so when I'm thinking about having civil conversation, I want to try to focus on mainstream debates, unless I think someone who may be so far off the beaten path as to deny the Holocaust may be open to a change of mind. If so, I may engage that person, or I may decide it's a waste of time. Okay. All right. Interpretation. Some stuff does have to be interpreted. Now, some of the things we believe we experience directly, right? If I put my hand on a hot stove and I scream because it's hot, I probably don't have to interpret. I'll probably know the truth directly. We do have some direct experience of things that create belief automatically. Other things, not so much. Other things do have to be interpreted. So one of you is saying there are objective facts, there's subjective observations. Yeah, and trying to sort through all this can be challenging. Jim's asking about how do you derive truth if you're not directly experiencing something. Well, it's called the evidence. And even with, I'm glad you asked it, because even if you agree with my definitions of truth and reality, and I think they are absolutely solid definitions, it doesn't mean you and I will always know what the truth is. Now that's where evidence comes into play. Evidence is anything that seems to support a truth claim. And evidence has to be interpreted, it has to be weighed. Something that seems to support a truth claim today may evaporate essentially tomorrow. It may not be very relevant. So in court, for example, you think about a court, criminal court, someone's charged with a crime and you're on the jury and you have to sort through all kinds of evidences, maybe eyewitness testimony, maybe a physical object left at the scene, maybe a video of this crime scene, maybe an expert witness, all these different kinds of evidences that we try to use to establish the truth when we weren't there. And we all believe a lot of things about the world, even though we haven't experienced them directly. In fact, these are wonderful comments. And they provide a great segue, I think, to this. Let me do this slide and see if it addresses some of the other things in chat that everyone can read. I would encourage everyone to pull up the chat box and see what your peers are saying. There are three basic types of truth claims that we make. It starts with semantics. It starts with the choices of words that we use, and the meanings of those words. So in chat box, one of you is bringing up, two of you are bringing up the word facts. What is a fact? Are there alternative facts? I mean, when people use that word, we have to figure out what they mean. If they're using language in a responsible way, in a way that most experts would agree to, a fact is a truth claim with lots of evidence, generally that experts have agreed on. It's a truth claim with lots of evidence that generally experts have agreed on. So we should agree on facts. Here's the problem, though. One of you is saying that you all cannot see all of the, that you can't see all the comments in chat. Okay, I'm reporting as many of them as time will allow, so I'll do my best to keep up with it. But someone asked about, do we need to agree on the facts? What about so-called alternative facts? I mean, just because someone says it's a fact doesn't make it a fact, right? And if by alternative fact, somebody means, again, what do they mean by alternative? If they mean there are more facts than have been presented so far, that's reasonable. If they mean, I don't like the facts, so I'm just going to make up my own, that's not reasonable, right? All right. So, for example, in the abortion debate, when I lecture on abortion, I give all the arguments for pro-life, all the arguments for pro-choice. I'm not trying to tell people what to believe. I'm trying to empower them to think, but I have to make judgments about words. I call the conservative view pro-life and the liberal view pro-choice because that's what people call themselves, but they don't often show that courtesy to the other side. Pro-choice people will sometimes call pro-life people anti-choice. And pro-life people will call pro-choice people pro-abortion people. And those things sound very different. And is it a fetus or an unborn baby, right? How about the M word? Is abortion murder? This comes up in the abortion debate. It also comes up in the euthanasia debate. If we ever decide to legalize active euthanasia, where doctors actually are the cause of the patient's death, which is currently illegal. We let doctors in some states, like Washington, we allow them to assist death with dignity, assisted suicide, but the doctor's not the one causing the death. In the euthanasia debate, which would involve the doctor actually causing the death, is euthanasia murder, in it killing an innocent person? So all of these things start with language. They start with the choices that we make with words and what we mean by those words. Second type of truth claim is empirical. And there are different levels, and this will touch on what some of you are saying in chat as well. We all believe a lot of things about the world because of the five senses, what we see and hear, also touch, taste, and smell, right? So I believe some things about the world because I've experienced them directly. But if that's all I knew about the world, I wouldn't know very much. Thankfully, I have your experiences and you can tell me what you've seen, where you've been, what you've heard. But as one of you said in here, you raised the question, how do I know whether I can trust what you're telling me? You took a trip to Zimbabwe. I've never been to Zimbabwe, and you tell me about it. Now, because I haven't been there, I have to make a judgment about whether I can trust your testimony, right? And so now we're going to potentially have some disagreement. But that's the second level of empirical belief, is what everybody else tells you about the world based on their experience. And the third level is the science. Why do we disagree sometimes about science? Why do some people believe what the scientists say about climate change and other people don't? And there could be a lot of reasons. And I don't want us to debate climate change tonight. But people give different reasons. Some, I think there can be some good reasons to question it. There can be some illegitimate reasons to deny it. I mean, people give different reasons for questioning or denying climate change. But we don't always agree about what the scientists say for a couple reasons. Maybe what they tell us is just too inconvenient. We don't want to believe it. Or maybe we know that scientists have been wrong before, and maybe they're wrong about this one. Okay? And so people have different reasons, but we don't always agree with the scientists. And finally, this is where I live mostly as a philosopher in the humanities, what we call normative truth claims, or if you prefer, I think for this category, I would just rather say beliefs. These are value-based. These normative things we say, this is the way it ought to be, right? You should be pro-life. You should be pro-choice. Death penalty is right. Death penalty is wrong. Religion. This religion is true. No, that one is true. No, they're all false. Aesthetics, philosophy of art. What is art and what is good art? Right? I'm pretty sure they have to talk about this at the museum a lot. What counts as art? And how do you judge aesthetic quality? Politics, economics. These things are, we disagree about these things because while you can have some standards, you can have some evidence, you can make rational arguments for beliefs about ethics and religion and all that, but in the end, it still requires some subjective judgment. You can look at all the evidence and then you have to make a decision sometimes, right? All right. So this is still the introduction to civil conversation. But I think it's important to start with an understanding of why we humans disagree so much, because there's nothing wrong with disagreement, but disagreement can become incivility. Incivility can become hatred, and hatred can become violence, right? We've seen it in our recent political history. All right, now, did you all get the some of the notes in the chat box about how to see all the comments in the chat box? I'm hoping everybody got that and you can take care of it. All right. Causes of incivility and then what to do about it. So now I'm going to be, you know, when there's something wrong, you go to the doctor, you get a diagnosis, and then you get some treatment. So I'm going to diagnose us, including myself, and I'm going to try to treat the problem and see what you all think. So let me get through this slide and then I'll check chat again to see if you all have responded to the material here. Now, I recognize, and I'm sure you do too, that sometimes people use incivility intentionally to get what they want. We've seen this in politics. I'm not addressing that primarily tonight. If someone is uncivil on purpose, we're dealing with a little different scenario. We're dealing potentially with a moral problem, right? But this is primarily about you and about me trying to talk to our family members, our friends, our neighbors about things that matter, and it's challenging. And I think the causes of incivility for most of us are subconscious. We are not fully aware of what's going on in our minds when a conversation goes off the rail, when it goes in a direction that we don't really want it to go in. So here we go. Tell me what you think. Failure to recognize my own limitations. You know, when you and I disagree, sometimes we act like we know it all, don't we? We act like we know it all. In fact, most of us probably think we know more than we know, just in general. To some extent, this is why philosophy exists in Western civilization, because this guy named Socrates, 2,400 years ago, had a basic conviction about human beings. Socrates' basic conviction was this: people think they know more than they know. And he set out to try to prove that to people. Not the best way to make friends and influence people, right? To try to show them that they're wrong about a bunch of stuff. But he was just convinced that human beings felt more confident than they should be about their knowledge. And here's where I want to ask the question, I said my favorite philosophical question, or one of them, based on one of your comments tonight. Someone said there's a difference between truth and beliefs. Now, let me tell you another semantics thing in philosophy. We don't use the word beliefs the way the scientists sometimes do. Sometimes in science, they talk about fact versus belief or something like that, or truth versus belief. In philosophy, we use the B word for anything you consider to be true. Everything you think is true, whether you can prove it or not, is a belief. Okay, so just so you know how I'm using the word, some of our beliefs we can prove, some of our beliefs we cannot. But if you think it's true, it's a belief. All right, so with that in mind, here's my fun question. Well, I have two of them. Is it safe to assume that you and I, all of us, everyone attending this seminar tonight, is it safe for me to assume that we're all wrong about some stuff? I think it's safe. You know, I just went out on a limb, but it feels pretty thick. We're all wrong about stuff because we've been wrong so many times before about trivial things and things that mattered. So we're probably wrong, which means my beliefs about truth are not synonymous with truth. If I'm wrong about something right now, why don't I change my mind? Because I don't know what I'm wrong about. So my beliefs about truth are not synonymous with truth because I'm surely wrong about some things. So now here's the fun question, the other fun question. Which do you value more, truth or your own beliefs? If you agree with me, they're not identical because you're wrong about something, then which one matters more, truth or your own beliefs about truth? If I truly value truth, this thing called truth in every area of life, if I value that, I think, if I value it as much as I should, then it matters more to me than my own beliefs. And if it does, I should listen to you when you disagree with me, just in case you're right. But if I value my own beliefs more than truth, I don't want to listen to you. You see? Second cause of incivility, mostly subconscious. We like our beliefs. Now, we may not like all of them. I had this conversation with a friend the other day, and she said, no, I have a lot of beliefs I don't like. Maybe so. But whether or not we like our beliefs, I think we like being right. Sometimes we say, I hope I'm wrong, but is that our normal attitude? Is our normal attitude, I hope I'm wrong? No, I like being right. It's fun to be right. It makes you feel good about yourself and gives you a sense of security. Our beliefs about everything give us a sense of security in this crazy, confusing world. But we have to be careful here. The mere fact that I want my beliefs to be true or that I like some of them is no guarantee that they're true. One of you is asking in chat, this is assuming that the truth is actually true. Who decided what is truth? Well, I can't answer that generically. It depends on what the truth claim is. That slide that I put up a few minutes ago, truth claims. We claim things are true about language, things are true about the physical world, and things are true in the judgments we make about values, right? So, I mean, who determines truth? Well, ultimately, each one of us has to decide for ourselves what the truth is about everything. I had a friend who told me years ago, David, you either think for yourself or someone else will do it for you. There's no other option. So the question, who decides what is truth, has many layers to it. Fundamentally, we all decide for ourselves what to believe about things that matter. There are experts, though, who have drawn some conclusions, and they have some knowledge. If someone has expertise that I don't, it's no guarantee they're right? It's no guarantee that they're right, but I should probably take the opinions of experts seriously anyway. All right, back to the causes of incivility. Here's a powerful one. When we express some of our beliefs, we identify with them as people. So this is what I mean. I'll give you an example, maybe one example from each of the big three. In religion, if you tell me what your religious identity is, you probably don't say, I believe in Christian teaching, or I believe in Jewish teaching, or I believe in Buddhist teaching, or I believe in naturalism. You probably say, I am a Christian, I am a Buddhist, I am Jewish, I am a naturalist. I am. Wow, that's powerful. How about on the abortion issue? If you are committed to one side or the other, do you say, I believe in the pro-life view, I believe in the pro-choice view? Or do you say, I am pro-life, I am pro-choice? You probably say, I am. How about in politics? If you vote Republican consistently or Democratic consistently, is that how you say it? I vote Republican consistently. I vote Democratic consistently. No, you say, I am a Republican, I am a Democrat. Now, I'm not criticizing that. I'm just here to say there's a danger in it, because if I am what I believe, then when you disagree with my belief, what does it feel like? It feels like an attack on me, but it's not, you see? You have a right to disagree with my beliefs about religion, ethics, politics, science, or anything. But if I'm not careful, it can feel like you're attacking me. And I think this is why we become uncivil quite a bit. It feels insulting. You don't agree with me? But we have to be able to separate that in our minds when people do disagree with us. All right, the incivility of the other. Sometimes the other person starts to become uncivil, and it takes us off guard, and we find ourselves getting in the mud with them if we're not really careful. Emotion. A few years ago, I started thinking very specifically and intentionally about the following question. Why do we have, many of us, why do we have so much emotion attached to our beliefs? Now, emotion is wonderful. I love emotion. Emotion makes life worth living. Imagine if we humans, and I'm a philosopher, I believe in reason, but in the end, I want to feel good, right? Imagine if we humans had no emotional capacity whatsoever. We're just computers. How boring would life be? Emotion was like a fire. I've got a fireplace. I love a real wood burning fire in the fireplace. It's warm, it's beautiful, it makes me happy. But what happens when that beautiful fire spreads out of control? It's destructive. And I think emotion is like that. It warms us, it makes us happy, it makes life worth living. But when it spirals out of control, it becomes destructive. And I think fundamentally we have emotion attached to belief because that we believe things that matter. Ideas create the world. If an idea spreads throughout a society and becomes the consensus, and then it becomes a law, it's going to affect all of us, right? So I understand, I think, why we feel so deeply about some of these things, but we have to keep the fire in the fireplace, don't we? All right, a couple more things here, and then I'll see what you all have to say about this list before we try to treat the problem here. Sometimes we want affirmation from other people too much, and this can come in different forms. back to my story, from fundamentalist to progressive, I wanted, I had sincere changes of mind about important things. And I felt like I had really, really good reasons to believe the new things about these topics. And I wanted to be able to share them with people in my life. And ideally, I would love for the people I share my new beliefs with to say, wow, David, that makes sense. I agree with you now. I've changed my mind too. But that's not likely. So the next thing I was hoping for is that, the people in my life would say, David, I disagree with you, but I see where you're coming from. I respect what you're saying, and it's okay. It's okay for us to disagree. But here's the problem, and especially with fundamentalist religion. It's not okay to disagree, because if I don't believe the right things, I might end up in hell forever, according to that worldview. A psychology professor I taught with back in Indiana, I used to teach in Indiana, a psychology professor who knew about my journey. And he knew I was probably halfway down that path of changing my mind. He said, David, if the people in your life won't affirm you, find new people. Easier said than done, maybe, but yeah, if I need other people's approval of my character or my intelligence, one of you just shared in chat that needing approval is debilitating, and it is. It can, and some people care about the opinions of others more than other people do. I struggle a lot with that in my life. I feel like I have always cared too much about other people's opinion of me. So we got to back off. If they can't get it, if they don't understand it, if they don't think you're okay, you're probably okay anyway, right? And finally, I want to end where I started here, with failure to recognize my own limitations. A very similar concept, closed-mindedness. It's okay to have convictions, right? If you believe very deeply, that's what a conviction is. It's a deep belief. It's a belief concerning which you are convinced at a deep level. I recommend a few, right? We don't want to just be leaves blowing in the wind. We want to have some convictions. But it's very difficult to be open-minded on something when we have a conviction about it. I don't think it's a contradiction. I think I can believe deeply and I can still look at you and say, this is what I think. But if you can make a compelling case that I'm wrong, I'll think about a change of mind. Not a contradiction, but very, very difficult. And we have to be aware. Knowledge is power. And I'm hoping that, just understanding these causes of incivility will be the first step toward empowering us to be civil. So what do you think of what's on the list? Do you agree? And is there anything that any of you might add to the list? Another cause of incivility that I didn't include here. Anything else? Insecurity, mental illness, extreme lack of impulse control. Yeah. I'm going to connect that insecurity that Jim suggested with, some of these things include a lot of ideas. But when I say we want some of our beliefs to be true, we like some of our beliefs, there are a lot of reasons for that. And we do have a felt need for security. As I was changing my mind about religion, that was the foundation of my life. And it can make you feel secure. Sometimes we have to go through a process of feeling insecure, feeling distress or turmoil in our pursuit of truth, knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So I feel like I was a happy person when I was a fundamentalist, and then I went through a lot of turmoil. But once I finally settled on a new set of beliefs, I became happy again. And so we have to recognize that. All right. I'm reading some really profound stuff in chat, and I also am starting to run out of time tonight. So I think what I should do is switch gears here and make some suggestions for what I think we can do about it. And then hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end where you all can just put anything left over, any of your thoughts, questions, or comments. I love both at the end, and we'll just see what's there, and I'll do the best I can with it. What can we do about this? I call this Ingredients in the Recipe of Civility. This is based to some extent on the work of Edward Langerak, who's written about this. DS, those are my initials. It just means I've revised what he has said about civility for this presentation. I sometimes in my teaching use this metaphor, ingredients in a recipe. I like it whenever I'm dealing with something complicated, something multifaceted, something we certainly don't want to overcomplicate, but we don't want to oversimplify either. Those are both logical fallacies, overcomplicating and oversimplifying. We want to split the difference. That's Occam's razor, the simplest adequate explanation. So I have 4 ingredients that I think are essential. One of the strengths of this metaphor of a recipe is that you can always delete an ingredient or add a couple more, right? Based on your taste. So these are the 4 things that I think are essential in this recipe. So here we go. Ingredients in the recipe. I think it starts with virtue. Virtue theory is an approach to ethics that is unique. Most moral theories focus on behavior. The utilitarians say whatever promotes the greatest good for the greatest number of people is the right thing. The egoist says whatever is good for you long-term, enlightened self-interest, that's the right thing to do. The divine command theorist says God exists, God has issued commands, we have to obey God, that's the right thing to do. All these different approaches to ethics, the vast majority of them focus on behavior. What makes a behavior right or wrong? But virtue theory is unique in that it asks the question of character. What does it mean to be good, not just do good? And those are related in virtue theory. If I'm committed to character, I've put 4 virtues of the many that people have talked about: humility, self-control, forbearance, and courage. And I'll talk about them in a minute. There are many more, but these are characteristics of noble people. And so one of the strengths of virtue theory is that it's unique. It focuses on character and how we can develop it. The other major strength of this is that it's fairly universal. For all of our disagreements as human beings, the virtues show up almost everywhere, in almost every culture, every religion, every philosopher who's worked on ethics. I mean, these things are universal. So humility, self-control, forbearance is just turning the other cheek, and courage, I mean, to some extent, these are valued almost everywhere. So character development is lifelong for many of us. We humans can resist change very stubbornly, especially when we have to change something about ourselves, not just a belief, but something about me, the believer, in the belief, right? So being humble should help me with that problem of thinking I know more than I know. Self-control helps to keep the fire in the fireplace. Forbearance is turning the other cheek. If you insult me or I feel insulted, if I could maybe in some situations give you another chance to explain what you mean and don't react immediately. And courage for those of us who may be shy, reserved, maybe those of us who have someone in our life who's dominant, maybe someone in our life who's a bully, and you feel like you should or must have a conversation with a dominant person or a bully. It's going to take courage, right? That inner strength to take a risk. So these are things I don't think we can generally just turn on like turning on the light switch and the light comes on, right? I can't just all of a sudden be humble or self-controlled. And maybe some situations where we find something deep within that we didn't realize was there. But generally, this is personal growth. This is lifelong pursuit of the virtues. But I think it starts here. Secondly, and one of my deep passions, personally and professionally, something I believe in and something I like to talk about. And for each of these ingredients, I just picked one word to help us remember: commonality, or our common humanity. Our common humanity. Regardless of identity or belief, you're just as human as I am. And I say that's what respect is, and that's essentially what civility is treating you as fully human regardless of identity or belief. Because you know what? Underneath our differences, we're all human. And if this category, human being, is valid, whenever we humans create a category and put a label on it, it's because we see common characteristics in things. So if human being is a valid category, what are the characteristics? And I think it starts with needs, basic needs. And we can even start with biology here. We all need food, clean water, shelter, clothing. We all need love and respect and opportunity, right? We all have some basic needs, regardless of identity or belief system. So recognizing the humanness of the other, our common humanity, and something that I also like to talk a lot about, and I'm going to just give you the cliff notes here: the process of belief formation. Have you ever thought to yourself, I know you have, how can that person believe that? How, you want to pull your hair out, how can these people believe that? Well, I actually like to ask the question more straightforwardly: how can they believe it? But then I want to change it. How can you and how can I believe whatever we believe about religion, ethics, politics, history, science? How do people come to believe things? We sometimes get very frustrated with each other. And I feel frustration toward other people sometimes and what they believe. But we forget, and I'm going to challenge you to think about something tonight, that with rare exception, people don't choose their beliefs the way they choose their behavior. Whatever you believe about abortion and the death penalty and God and global warming, you didn't just sit around your living room one day and decide to believe it. Beliefs emerge within us automatically as we live our lives and expose ourselves to all sorts of influences. Okay? You and I believe some things because we were raised to believe those things, and we've never had a good reason to question it. We believe some things because we know that they've been proven. So we believe some things based on reason, evidence. We all probably believe some things based on emotion. One of you suggested earlier. The need for security. The need for comfort. In this, again, this crazy, confusing, sometimes scary world. So we probably believe some things based on emotion. I talked about experts earlier. I mean, just because someone's an expert, it's no guarantee that they're right. But we all do, whether we realize it or not, we do depend on a lot of experts in this world for a lot of our beliefs. So upbringing, emotion, reason, trusting the judgment of others. I mean, all of these are the influences that create belief. So how can that guy believe that? Well, if you and I had lived that guy's life, had been raised by those parents and had all the same experiences, we'd probably believe a lot of that stuff too. So just understanding how beliefs emerge, it should make us a little bit more patient, a little bit more empathetic with each other. okay? Intentionality. Now, this is for many of us. It may not be for all of us. I know I have to be intentional. Some of you may be so naturally nice. You just showed up tonight to find out why it's hard for the rest of us to be civil. But many of us have to think about this, and we have to be committed to it, and we have to be intentional. And when we find ourselves going astray mentally, we have to pull ourselves back. Now, it's easy to focus on civility before a conversation or after it. In fact, we're all doing that right now. We're doing 2 of the 3 right now. We're all focusing on civility right now, and we're probably going to have a conversation in the future that's going to require us to be civil. So we're doing that. And we've had conversations that required this. So the challenge is to do it during. Sometimes I am aware of the need to focus on civility while I'm having the conversation, and sometimes I don't. And when I do, things usually go better. Okay? Well, my 4th and final ingredient here is communication. Following the principles of good communication, and they are many, really. If it's a conversation, then I get to speak and listen. And for many of us, the speaking part comes easier. We love to tell everybody what we believe in the right context. It's harder just to slow it down, to listen more, to interrupt less. I am amazed at how often we human beings interrupt each other, and I'm guilty of it too. Sometimes interruption is fine. You know, if you just feel like you need to insert a point right there in the conversation, because if you wait, it won't be as relevant. Usually people are fine with that. If someone won't stop talking and it was your turn 10 minutes ago, you might have to interrupt. An elderly person once said, if I don't interrupt you, I'm going to forget what I was going to say. So there can be valid reasons for interrupting, but I think we do it too much. We're in such a hurry. You're talking, and I just can't wait to tell you what I believe because I'm so right and you're so wrong. Why can't I just wait a little longer? Right? Why are these interviews in the media on cable news, MSNBC, Fox, CNN? Some of these interviews, it's like they're 100 miles an hour. We got to hurry up and do this. Tell me your worldview in 30 seconds because I got to go to break, right? I mean, we've just set up a society where we don't really sit around and slow it down anymore, and perhaps we should. The other thing I put here, disagreeing and agreeing or affirming. I think that when 2 people are disagreeing very strongly about something important, if one of them will just agree with one thing that the other said, a lot of the tension evaporates, right? I mean, I've seen it. I've done it myself. I've had it done unto me. I've observed other people going at it, really disagreeing. If one person just says, you know, I agree with what Joe said 5 minutes ago, blah, 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 right? And they've disagreed for the past 30 minutes, but, you know, I agreed with something you said 5-10 minutes ago that I really liked. It sends a message. I'm not trying to disagree with you. I'm not trying to argue. And when we agree, I'll acknowledge it, you see? When you have an insight, I'll acknowledge it. All right. Now, so what do you all think? It's 2 minutes till 7. I'm allowed to go to 7:15 if I must. I have a concluding slide that I can use or not use. I would really like to know what you all think about these ingredients or any ingredients you would like to add. Somebody just asked, what does humanness mean? I just mean the characteristics that all Homo sapiens have in common, right? The human race, and recognizing that other human beings who are part of the human race have some of the same basic needs, biological and emotional and social needs as you and I do. It's far less offensive to be interrupted if the interruption is on topic than if it's on a different matter or to another person. Someone who's changing the subject, you mean? Yeah, that can be intentional, or that can just be sloppy thinking. Honesty, is that an ingredient within virtue and or intentionality, or maybe all aspects of your recipe? You know, I keep adding virtues. Honesty absolutely is a virtue and is absolutely relevant. Hopefully we're all trying to get to truth. So sure, absolutely, honesty is relevant. Somebody's asking for my concluding slide. I should be able to throw it up for you. All right. A couple things here. May I add to commonality conditioning in terms of how beliefs are formed, that we're just conditioned because we hear things all the time, if that's what you mean. Perhaps you could clarify that. One of you says, it's frustrating that some try to be civil, others do not. What do we do with them? Let me come back to that on the next slide, the concluding slide. Okay, I'm not sure I can comment on everything here. I'm not familiar with everything I'm reading in chat. Recommendations for communication, texting and phone. Yeah, every form of communication has its own strengths and weaknesses and challenges. I love to text, but it is really easy to misunderstand people in text. And I've had a lot of those misunderstandings over the years texting. I don't know if I have, you know, a formula to follow, giving people benefit of the doubt, because I've had so many people say I misinterpreted their text, and giving them the benefit of the doubt certainly may help. Let me pull up the concluding slide here then and see if there's anything else you want to see here, and this will get at what about other people who don't do it. I'm coming back to one of these initial questions that I raised an hour ago. To converse or not to converse, that is the question. If the other person refuses to be civil, if I'm having a conversation, let's assume that I'm doing a pretty good job, you know, with my own civility, they're not being civil. I mean, I have several options. I could show forbearance. I've heard stories of people who were being insulted, and instead of throwing mud right back or saying, how dare you insult me like that, they decided to show forbearance. And the way they did it was to ask why the other person felt that way about them. You just described my religion or my ethnicity. I have two people in mind that have told stories since I started doing this presentation. And one was about religion, one was about ethnicity. And they said each of them was talking to someone who was very insulting for those issues. And these two people decided to turn the other cheek and just say, well, why do you think that about me? Fill in the blank, my ethnicity. Why do you think that about this kind of person? Why do you think that about my religion? I'm really curious. You just insulted it. Why do you believe that? And allowing them, and this is not always going to work. And forbearance, in my view, is a virtue, but we have to draw boundaries and not allow people to mistreat us forever. But in these two stories that I have in mind, when the people had to explain why they were so condescending, they realized it was baseless. And in these two cases, they apologized, and good things came from it. It's not always going to happen that way. But not everybody's a candidate. And I'll just say this again. In my journey, I'll come back to my journey one more time here. I could not share all of my new beliefs with everyone. I tried with some. Sometimes it went pretty well. Sometimes it didn't go well. I lost friends over it. So we have to pick our conversation partners carefully based on their tolerance level for the topic. And somebody, your family member, your friend may be a good conversation partner for this disagreement, but not that one. Their tolerance level, my tolerance level. Maybe my emotions are too raw to talk to somebody who disagrees with me right now, and I have to shut it down and just not do it. And there's also this very practical matter of priorities. We don't have the time or the energy to talk about everything with everyone. And we have to make judgments about, as I said at the beginning, not just which conversations potentially will be civil, but which ones will be meaningful, productive, useful, and we don't always know. Now, if we choose to engage someone, the other thing we have to do is ask ourselves what the purpose of the conversation is. And there isn't just one valid purpose. But if we're not sure what it is, we may not be productive. Am I trying to debate them? Am I trying to persuade them to change their minds? Am I trying to demonstrate that I think my view of this is superior to theirs? I think yours is fallacious. I think yours is based on a lie. Your belief is based on a lie. And maybe we're having a debate and I'm really trying to convince you. There's a place for that. It's fraught with risk. But if both people can maintain their composure, there's a place for it. Dialogue is a little different. It means we still share our views with each other and our reasoning, but we intentionally listen to the other with the possibility of having a change of mind or incorporating something that they said into our own belief system. Maybe there's some other, maybe this conversation is just about helping you understand where I'm coming from, or vice versa. So not everybody is a candidate for this. And we have to accept that we can't have these conversations with everyone. If you're not sure, I say give them an appetizer before you give them the whole meal. I would share some of my changes of mind on religious teachings that I felt were not super important teachings. They weren't central to the faith. The more peripheral or secondary beliefs that I had changed my mind on, and I shared some of those with people I wasn't sure how it would go, just to see. I mean, if they choke on that belief, there's no way I'm going to tell them what I believe about something more important, right? But if they do well on a fairly minor issue, then maybe I'll share some more. I do think there are some people who are just outside the boundaries of reasonableness. One of you, I think, mentioned the Holocaust earlier. I'm not going to include a Holocaust denier in any serious discourse about how to create peace, let's say, between the Israelis and the Palestinians. If I were in charge of putting a committee together to create a Middle East peace plan, I'm not going to include Holocaust deniers. I have to make a judgment about some beliefs, in this case, a historical belief that has so much evidence. The evidence is overwhelming, and to include someone who denies it not only is irrational, but it would be incredibly painful for those maybe who survived it or are the descendants or otherwise feel a connection to those who survived it. And at some level, we all should, because of our common humanity, right? The other thing about civility is at some point in the evolution of modern democracies, people are allowed to believe what they want, but they're not always allowed to do what they want. So at some point, we will force people to conform to a new moral consensus. So if you want to believe that slavery is fine, you have a right to your belief, but you can no longer own a slave, right? We have to do this. Again, in modern democracies, the way I say it is our understanding of morality evolves. I don't think our morality evolves. I think our understanding of it does. And at some point, you cannot have a human slave, right? All right. So that is my conclusion with one leftover question for you. And this question actually comes from Humanities Washington. When I was presenting this a couple of years ago, to them for their acceptance, they said, we love this, we think this is timely, but we want you to think about a question and we'd like for you to pass it on to your audiences. And here's the final question. Is incivility ever appropriate? Is it ever okay to be disrespectful? And so I thought about it and I don't know that I can give you a lot of guidance, but I'll just tell you how I've answered the question for myself. My answer is yes, believe it or not. I thought when they challenged me, the staff at Humanities Washington challenged me with this question, I thought about, some of the worst things that humans do to each other. one of the worst things we do is go to war. And I started to think about, I mean, war, of course, in war, people kill other people. And, you know, to some extent, that's the most uncivil thing you can do to another human being. We're talking about how to talk respectfully, but in war, you destroy the other person. It's terrible. But I'm not a pacifist. I'm a just war theorist. I was reflecting on my view of war to answer this question. I think we get into way too many wars, but that's another question. Do I believe that war is ever justified? My answer is yes. Wars against people like Hitler, I believe in, I support. And so if in that, or, I'm not an American historian, but apparently we had to have a civil war, civil in a different sense, right? We had to have a civil war, apparently, to bring slavery to an end. Thousands of Americans fighting, killing each other. So because I believe sometimes war is inevitable for justice, for defending the innocent, and that's as uncivil as you can get. I have to say, yes, incivility is sometimes appropriate. I don't always know where to draw the line, right? Our political climate, as you know, regardless of your politics, our political climate for some time now has been toxic. I think we all want it to be better. We want it to be more civil. So I guess the best advice I can give is civility should be the norm and incivility should be the exception. And where to draw the line? Well, that's going to require some judgment. Okay. All right. Those are my thoughts about civil conversation in an angry age. Anybody else would like to share a question or a comment? Someone says, thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you all for being a part of this. I'll give it back to Chelsea then.
Yes, I was just coming in. I want to say thank you so much for this presentation. It was so insightful. I really loved all the engagement we got and all the comments, and your answers were just, yeah, very thought provoking. Totally agree. So thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
if there's any questions, you can keep those going. Otherwise, I will be sending the slipping my mind.
Evaluation.
Evaluations, yes. I will be sending the evaluations from Humanities Washington shortly. So please, again, go take the time and fill those out. They're very useful for Humanities Washington and for future programs.
Very good. All right. Hope to interact with you all again sometime. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.